So today, we're going to dive into this ancient Pali term, Sammā-diṭṭhi. Now, I know it sounds complex, but trust me, it's basically a master key for how you see and interact with reality. Getting a handle on how this thing actually functions, well, it can completely change the game for you. You've probably heard it translated as right view or right understanding. And sure, that's fine, but it's just the label on the box, right? What we're going to do is crack open that box and see how the mechanism inside actually works. What is its real functional purpose in your life? All right, to really get to its core function, we have to do a little decoding. We're going to break the word itself down because each little piece carries its own specific instruction for our minds. First up, we have sum. Think of this as meaning together or with. But functionally, what it's really pointing to is a state of being perfectly in sync, totally complete and coherent, everything fitting together. Next, we've got ma. This little syllable is all about measurement. It's the standard, the correct scale, the definitive benchmark. You know, it's that true north against which we measure everything else. And finally, there's diṭṭhi. Now, this means a view or a perspective, but it goes deeper than that. It's really about the fixed worldview you hold on to. It's the very lens through which you see, well, everything. So you put it all together, and what do you get? Something way more powerful than just right view. Sammā-diṭṭhi is a worldview that is perfectly, completely synchronized with the true measure of reality. It's like tuning your personal radio frequency to the universe's actual broadcast signal. Okay, so with that powerful idea in mind, let's talk about what this means in the real world. I want you to think of Sammā-diṭṭhi not as some belief you have to adopt, but as a master calibration for your mind. It's the absolute first setting you have to get right. Because if you don't, everything else you try to do can go way off course. And to make this super clear, let's look at 4 analogies from our world today that just perfectly capture what this calibration is all about. Let's start with something you probably use all the time, your GPS. Have you ever thought about what happens if its starting point, its initial calibration, is off by just a single degree? You end up miles from where you wanted to go, right? Well, that's what Sammā-diṭṭhi is. It's that initial lock, that zero adjustment. It's the moment your GPS finally syncs up and says, with confidence, you are here. It makes sure your perceived starting point actually matches your real place on the map. Only then can you figure out the right way to go. Okay, how about this one? Picture a graphic designer. Their whole job relies on seeing colors accurately. But what if their computer monitor has this slight, almost unnoticeable yellowish tint? Everything they create is going to be off. The final product, a total mess. And that's a perfect picture of this process. It's about calibrating our own internal monitor, our perception to the real standard. It gets rid of the tint from our own wants, our fears, our biases, so we can finally see the world in its true colors. Oh man, if you've ever used a VR headset, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When those lenses aren't perfectly aligned with your eyes, there's this weird disconnect. What you're seeing doesn't match what your body is feeling, and you immediately get dizzy, confused. It just feels wrong. That dizzy feeling? That's a perfect metaphor for suffering. It's what happens when our ideas about reality don't match up with reality itself. So calibration is just the simple act of focusing the lenses, of aligning our inner world with the outer world, and getting rid of that nauseating friction. And for our last one, let's get down to basics. The foundation. Would you ever build a house on a foundation that isn't perfectly level? Of course not, because you know that even the tiniest error at the bottom gets magnified more and more the higher you build, until the whole thing is just unstable. And that, right there, is the ultimate job of Sammā-diṭṭhi. It's the spirit level for your mind. It makes sure that the very foundation you're building your thoughts, your words, and your actions on is perfectly aligned with the ground of truth. That's the only way to build a life that's strong and stable, and isn't going to collapse under pressure. So, you see, whether it's a GPS, a monitor, a VR headset, or a house, that initial calibration is absolutely non-negotiable. So what happens when we skip that step in our own minds? We end up running on a flawed default setting, a system that's just fundamentally out of sync with everything around it. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. On the left, you've got the miscalibrated view, what's called Micha-ditti. Its system is constantly spitting out an error message. This isn't how I want it. It must be my way. And that just creates endless friction and suffering. But look at the right. The calibrated view is just quietly reading the system log. Okay, this is happening because of these conditions. No error, no fight, just observation. You see, the point here is that this calibration isn't some small adjustment. We're talking about a fundamental upgrade to your entire cognitive operating system. It completely changes the default setting that everything else runs on. So what is this new upgraded default setting? Well, it's the understanding of anicca. It's this core recognition that the universe was never designed to operate according to your personal commands. Things happen, they change, they go away, all based on conditions, not because you willed it. And accepting this isn't pessimistic. It's just efficient. It stops us from fighting a battle we were never going to win anyway. And the process for stopping all that friction is just beautifully logical. First, you just change a reference point. You shift it from how I demand things to be to how things actually are. When that reference point changes, your whole reaction to what's happening changes automatically. And when your reaction changes, that whole chain reaction of stress and anxiety and suffering, it just stops, dead in its tracks. So that really just leaves us with one final, and I think pretty important question. Your perception isn't just some passive window you look through. It is the #1 tool you use to build your entire life. So it's probably worth asking yourself, when was the last time you checked its calibration?